And welcome to another episode in Conversations in the Future of Work. Today's episode, I have to say, I'm really excited about because it is focusing on a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, all things video. And our guest, Chris Savage, I've been following for a while. You got to check him out on LinkedIn. He's got some phenomenally funny videos that he and his team post on the regular. So in this conversation in the future of work, we'll be focusing on rethinking video for a more human connection. With that, Chris, pass it over to you.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's nice to see you. And I'm the CEO of a company called Wistia. We're a video marketing platform. So our goal is to make it easier for marketers to make, edit, share, host, analyze videos. I also host a podcast called Talking Too Loud, where I interview guests about really the entrepreneurial journey and marketing and brand. And it's we're about to hit 100 episodes, which I'm really excited about. But I'm very excited to be here with you today talking about rethinking video for more human connection, as I've seen the evidence myself of actually using video to scale relationships and build relationships and really just like build a brand that is extremely human. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. So first question, video's gone through such an insane evolution over the past few years. And I'd love to hear from your perspective, like what is or are the biggest hurdles that companies are facing in terms of getting the most out of video?
It's a great question. So we just released a report a couple months ago called the State of Video Report. Every year, we basically look at the data across our platform. So hundreds of millions of videos and billions of views. We interview marketers and talk to them about their challenges. And one of the really interesting things that we saw this year is it's like a huge percentage of people want to make more video. It's like 85% of people want to make more video. But a lot of folks actually don't have more budget. And tech in particular has had a very hard time with high interest rates and many other things like flowing through the system. And so what seems to be holding people back today is trying to figure out how to enable people on their teams to make video that actually looks good and represents the brand well. And that's an easy thing to say and a hard thing to do because a lot of folks are afraid to get on camera or they are afraid to edit. And so I think that today seems like what is stopping folks is like they all want to do it, but how can you do it and where you make great stuff and it's actually affordable and easy to do?
Right. And I would imagine, especially across larger teams, that doing that at scale, right, making sure that anyone who might be using video would be empowered in these ways is a big challenge too, right?
That's right. And it's changed, like the market's changed so much since 2020. Like I think about it as pre-2020 and post-2020. Yeah. And people want to make videos forever. I started Wistia almost 18 years ago. And when I first started talking to companies, they'd be like, this sounds great, but I can't spend 20 grand in a video. And I watched that price come down as the technology changed. And the thing that happened in 2020 is that people saw their computer as a camera. Mm-hmm. And so expectations have shifted where you might be afraid of getting on camera. You might be concerned about the brand, but there's probably someone in your organization who's saying, hey, shouldn't we be able to do this ourselves? Shouldn't you be able to do it? And I think that the culture shifted too, where we see people all the time in their homes, right? I don't know if you're in your home, if you're in an office right now. I'm in my home office. We see inside people's homes all the time. That is not what it used to be. Yeah. I think about, do you remember the guy who was doing that remote interview on BBC and his kid came in the back and it was like chaos? Yeah. Tried to put the kid out of the room. That was a remarkable moment that wouldn't be remarkable anymore.
Right.
Right. If your kids come on the background, that's happened to everybody. Yeah. And so I think it's just, I like thinking about that because it is such an indication of how much the culture shifted. And so it's all about how do you find tools, process, how do you shift expectations to give people the freedom to experiment? And that's really what you need is a lot of experimentation. If you can grant your team that ability, someone is going to find a way to make it work. And if you're paying attention, then you can replicate what that person did, ideally.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that actually feeds into the next question. Like, how do you see video continuing to evolve as a channel of communication? You noted a few things in your previous answer, but I'm curious to just go a little deeper on that.
I just think that what we're seeing is like an insatiable hunger for more video. I think there's a lot of things that are going to create even more video. AI, obvious one. AI is going to enable us to make it much easier for someone to make a video. That's already happening. There are tools that we have at Wistia, but lots of tools that are going to help you with the editing and creation of video. There's also literally, AI avatars here today where you can make an avatar of yourself and not have to be on camera, type what you want to say, and it will come out. And this is going to do two things, I think. I think we're going to see way more video, but I also think it is going to shift the emphasis from just making video to making video that has a person that you trust in it.
Yeah.
And so the connection to the human, to the individual is going to matter a lot more. We also see this on social already, where all the social platforms are not giving the same organic reach to brands as they give to individuals. They've all tuned their algorithms, right, to stop them from being overrun with AI too. So you have these two factors together, which I think is causing this really interesting shift of you want to connect with a person in a company, a person that represents a company, a person that you think you can trust on a specific topic. And so we're going to see more video, but it's going to be more important to be yourself and find ways of doing things that an AI can't do to prove that you're a real human being. And that's going to add up to be a way of scaling trust in this world where there's effectively going to be infinite content.
Totally. So this is one of the things that I've been most looking forward to asking you is with there in our view, right, at Virtual Sapiens, we use AI specifically to help the human improve the way they show up, to help them improve their presence and communication skills and their confidence. But there's, from the beginning, we've had investors be like, well, why waste your time having the AI try to improve the human when you can just use the human to deep fake, certain behaviors on top of that human directly. So it's interesting to hear. I 100% agree. I think that the value of being able to prove to the person on the other end, the person who's receiving that video, that hey, I took the time to create this video content for you, whether it was a very specific personalized video or something that was going out to the masses. I think that value is absolutely going to just become like a skyrocket.
Yeah, I think that, and I agree with you. I've heard the same thing. And there are use cases I've seen where having an AI avatar today could make sense. So a training video that people are required to watch, which already effectively, they weren't we're not prioritizing it being entertaining or engaging. They're prioritizing having certain information in it.
Yeah.
That's the one place I've seen where today, these AI avatars, let's be honest, most of these things are robotic anyway. It's not that different. But 100% agree that the issue is people are going to use it. There's going to be a lot of people that use it. So what does that mean for all of us? Some people I'm sure will look and be like, yeah, I want to use this. I don't want to make videos anymore. But what that inherently means is just like an LLM that's writing text for you, where it has, that thing with, what was the word that was being used? A delve. Did you see this? That
no.
There was this thing going around that was if the incidences of the word delve is an indication.
Oh, delve. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's an indication of if
totally.
something's written by an LLM, because LLMs like to use that a lot.
Yes.
And so then you start reading stuff and you start I think this is an AI, and then you instantly trust it less, even if it's true. It's just, you can tell we're wired to connect with people, right? So I think we have this knowledge. We know there's going to be way more video. It's going to be more robotic, and there's going to be certain things that are really hard to fake without it being a studio doing it.
Right.
What are those things? How do you find those things? How do you get good at those things? I think live events are going to be more important in the future world. I think live events online. I think live events in person. I think if you've had a connection with somebody where you're really sure that they're real and you can trust them, that actually might even give that person permission to use some AI content. Because if you look at Chris Savage, I trust Chris Savage. He's authentic. He's answering these questions. He's sharing his experience. I met him at some event, whatever. And then you see stuff coming from my social profiles. You at least know that there's a real person behind it. And I think even that is going to be a difference in the world that we're going into. And so it's kind of I also think for a long time, it was you talk to video producers, and everyone was trying to focus on like what the sweetest new gear was.
Right.
It's like, oh, I have this sweet new ring light. It is so cool. Like the look and feel is so different. And I was like, oh, I got this new lens. No one has this lens yet. And that was a way of like signaling to the viewer subconsciously, this is special and different.
Right.
And now it's like, that's shifting away from the tech actually to the creative approach you take.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can do something that's really creative or really interesting and is inherently like very human, that is going to do better and better over time as we have like an abundance of things that aren't creative as human.
Right. I also find, because there's this like TikTokification of video where like the more, you know, the more like, oh, the camera angle's coming from down here because you're like live in action. Like, and that I find is an interesting counterbalance too, because those videos are so unfiltered, at least in terms of what we were used to on Instagram. But then at the same time, then there are these like hyper realistic AI avatars or models, right? Who are just like superhuman looking people.
Yeah.
And it's just,
It's like, you know, it's funny. I had a conversation with my kids about this because my kids are 6 and 8, and we were talking about screens and videos online, because, you know, people talk about videos online in school. Every once in a while, we're watching The Fear. I really don't let them go wild on social. They have no social accounts. The only thing they would see is over my shoulder, basically. But I had to explain, I was like, look, anything you can see on a screen might not be real. And you have to look at it that way. You have to look at it and assume it might not be real. Doesn't mean it's not entertaining. Doesn't mean that there isn't real stuff on there, but you have to look at it with that view. And this is very similar to me when like Photoshop came along and suddenly like the broad scale advertising in the US changed, where for a long time it was like, if you saw someone on the cover of a magazine, you saw them at a billboard, you thought that was probably the real person. And then it's like, oh, they've been Photoshopped. And so everyone's expectations had to shift. It's like, hey, all the content we're seeing, all this stuff is hyper perfect.
Yeah.
And the reason it's hyper perfect is not just because people actually look like this. Yeah. It's because they've been Photoshopped. And we had to, as a society, as a culture, get used to that. And I think that's going to be what has to happen. I think my concern is, I think it's going to take a while for people to get used to it. And so there's going to be folks who are very hyper aware and like questioning the things that they see. And there's going to be it's going to take a long time before everybody gets there. Yeah.
Yeah. We need like a certified real human like badge on some of this content. That's crazy. Crazy world. So at Wistia, in terms of your, like the way you built the company, switching gears a little bit, and you know, your own policies, how do you guys balance in-person and virtual or video communication?
From like how we operate?
Yeah.
So the way we do it is we're a remote business now. We've got 185 people or so. We default to making sure that things work remotely, but then we do a bunch of in-person stuff. So like our normal meetings and everything are remote. We do a lot more asynchronously than we used to. There's a lot of documents and asking for questions in advance of meetings, and you know, trying not to have meetings unless you have like the agenda and the information and everything like readily available. But then what we do is we do a lot of our big planning in person. We work on trimesters. So there's 3 trimesters in a year. So we plan for 4 months at a time. When we do that, we bring basically the directors on up into the office in Cambridge, which is about like 25, 30 people. And we basically say, how did the last thing go? What did we learn? What's working? What's not working? And we set up, what do we think based on this we should do going forward? And it's really purposely across everything that we're building in product, and also how our go-to-market teams are thinking about things. So everyone can kind of know generally where we're going next. And then it's this process, this loop basically, where every time we do it, we check in and say, what can we do better? What worked and what didn't? And it's like a self-improving system is the idea. And that works out really well. And it's just also long days of meetings in person are much easier than long days of meetings remote. It's just easier to build the trust that you need to figure that stuff out. And then we bring the whole company together once a year for an offsite that is not designed to be work related at all. So it's just like pure fun and connection. That's the part that I found has been the hardest of running a remote business is how do you actually get the connection to your own team you're on can get pretty strong remotely, but connections to other teams is just harder to get it really strong while remote. And that matters on the, when you get to the long tail of like, are you giving feedback to this person? So you don't work with that much, but you work with them a little. If you feel a strong connection to them, you'll be like, hey, this went really well, but I have a concern about this. If you don't do that. And that I think that difference on the margins like really adds up. Yeah. So that's kind of how we do it.
So it makes a ton of sense. I'm curious if you feel in any way that this remote first and then in person with great intentionality, do you find that has almost helped foster these fortify these relationships between employees? And what I mean by that is I have found that a lot of people have this nostalgic kind of remembering of like the in-person office days with serendipity by the water cooler and whatever. And I was kind of like, I don't know if that it feels like that's a romanticization of the past. Whereas I feel like if you can move forward now and really be intentional about, okay, this doesn't have to be a meeting. It's going to be an asynchronous document. We're going to get together once a quarter with all the directors and then once a year with the entire company. And it is for the sole purpose of hanging out and having fun. To me, it seems like that could be so much more of a powerful, intentional way to build culture than just having everyone in the office.
I think that the serendipity thing can happen online. I think that it does require much more intentionality. And I think that's why a lot of people stop doing remote because they were like, I can't do this. This requires so much more prep and planning. But the other side of it is it's totally changed the pool of talent, in a way that I never could have imagined. And so in a really positive way is what I'm saying. So yeah, I think also if the only way you're getting good ideas or breakthrough ideas was through serendipity, you have a problem.
Right.
Right. And that is the other part of it is you can create it online. We use a virtual office that's called Roam.
Roam's great.
And it's been huge for us because it just means that you can see if someone is in their little virtual office, you can knock on the door, you can have a quick conversation. And we tracked actually before we did a test the whole company before we rolled it out. And we said, we're going to do this for 1 month. We're going to see how it goes. And we looked at the total time spent in meetings the month before and then the total time after. We looked at the number of meetings and the length of meetings. And what happened was when we switched to Roam, it cut our average meeting time from 35 minutes to 12. It increased the number of meetings by 50%. But actually, if you do that math, what you'd see is we actually spend less time in meetings than we used to. And there's more just fast connections where you see someone, you knock on their door, you have a quick conversation. And I just think that we're actually, if you think about how long in-person working was the default, it has not been that long that remote working has been the default. So what do cultures look like when you're remote? How do you connect with each other? How do you plan? If you think about it as the only time we've really been able to make this work is since things were normal in 2022, we've got 2 years. And I think that's why there's still a lot of friction, but for us at least, it's allowed us to move much faster, hire better folks, and just have more balance in how we work.
Yeah, totally. And I'm sure like you said, the workforce is able to be a little more distributed, but still unified. I do think it takes a lot more effort to do it well. But I also think that in-person workplaces take a lot of effort too. And
they do.
So
it's funny. We used to do a company trip, even when we were in person. We did many different things over the years. Right before COVID, we were doing ski trips. We take the company, anyone who wants to go for a ski trip. It was the same thing as our offsite now. And I think about that a lot. I saw these people every day, but what would end up happening is people would get in their routine, they'd put their headphones on and they would sit at their desk and they would work. And should I really interrupt this person when they're no, their headphones are on. There were days that I would talk to a pretty small number of people in person. even though there was tons of people around.
Yeah.
But like when we did the retreat, when we did the ski trip, it was all designed around that. And so it's kind of funny to think about, because I think like we found that was beneficial when we were in person. And that's like something I think about a lot. Or even just defending time outside of the workday. Like, hey, we're going to have something tonight at 6 o'clock. Well, how will this work with people who have kids? How will this work with people who have to pick up their pets? And like, that stuff just didn't happen as much, or it was inherently biased against some people. Right. And now if we say, hey, this is only happening 5 or 6 times a year, and you know way in advance what it is, you can actually plan for it so more people can go to it.
Yep, totally. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's in its infancy. I think it's still one of the most fascinating kind of conversations to speak with other leaders about. So really interesting to hear what you think. So finally, I'd love to hear, again, just focusing on your own entrepreneurial journey, it's just so interesting to me that this has been your space for so long. What has been some of your biggest learnings as a founder in this rapid world of work?
Yeah, wow. I mean, this we could talk about for hours. But I'll try to go with the thing that's like recently been, I think, the biggest learning. In 2022, we really invested in growing. 2021, 2022, we invested in growing our product and engineering teams enormously. We doubled them from like 50 people approximately to about 100 people. And I expected to go a lot faster because the breadth of the problems we were solving really expanded. Like Wistia, for basically all of our history, was hosting and analytics. And then in 2021, we said, hey, we're actually going to do recording. We're actually going to do editing. We're actually going to do live. And we're going to do this all at once. We're going to do this all on one platform. Sounds great, exciting. That means we're going to have to build tons of stuff. We need way more people to do that. So we doubled the team. And I expected that if we doubled the team, we would go faster. I didn't know if we would go twice as fast, but I thought we would go faster. I thought we'd go 50% faster, something like that. And we got these great people. We built the sub teams for everyone to work on the things they're working on. It seemed like it would work. And then we didn't go much faster. In fact, we started going slower, even with like double the people.
Wow.
And it was really hard because we had these big, bold expectations of what we wanted. And we kind of, for the first time, especially, we're not a bootstrap business. We raised angel money and then we bought out our angels. But like, we're very close to being a bootstrap business.
Yeah.
We've always felt like under-resourced. And for the first time, I was like, hey, I don't think we're under-resourced. Like, I think we actually have tons of incredible people. We kind of lost all the other excuses around why we're going slow. And so that year in 2022, we shipped 12 product things to customers that we told them about. More things that were behind the scenes, but like 12 product updates that were like, hey, these are our big product updates. And in late 22, we had a breakthrough that was, we had accidentally created a system that was really focusing on roadmaps and focusing on making sure our roadmaps were correct. So each team had a roadmap of all the things they were going to do. And we would meet, and we would discuss the roadmaps, and we would try to make sure that number 1 was the most important thing. Number 2 was the most important thing. Number 3 was the most important thing. And this seemed like a good idea because we built tons of successful things over the years, and we thought our advice was good, and we thought this was a good plan, and it was kind of how we'd done it. And in like October of 22, things were going so slow. We're like, what if the problem's us? Like, what if we've created a problem that is slowing us down? And then we hit on this roadmap and we're like, what if this is a problem? What if the problem is like, we're putting too much attention on if this is the right order and these are the right things, what that meant is that anyone who's building those roadmaps, number 1 had to be usually something that was very broad that could affect every customer. It had to be something that was extremely well researched. It had to be something that had like tons of usage data and all this stuff. So it was often a broad thing that was not very risky and that could be defended because they had to defend it. We said, we're done approving roadmaps. We're done making sure that the order is correct. We're actually going to give you complete freedom over your roadmap. But the one thing we ask is that we want you to ship something every 2 weeks to customers. We don't really care what it is. We care what your customer problem is. We're going to give you feedback, but you own it. You control it. And we just want you to ship faster. And the implicit thing we were saying is we don't actually know what's going to work, So let's ship and learn. And what ended up happening is in 22, we had 12 product updates that we told customers about. In 2023, we had 72.
Wow.
And on this year, we're on track to have more than 100 with the same team, basically.
Right.
Almost exactly.
Yeah.
And it was like an incredible lesson for me on how your culture and the systems that they can be well-intentioned, and for like a resource-starved org, it was probably the right thing. But as we shifted, we had created the problem that was holding us back. And once we changed the culture and we focused it more on shipping fast and we focused it more on ownership to those people, the speed came, and I've realized it really is all about speed. And if you can move quickly, what that allows you to do is the thing that was like number 5 on the list that the PM might have had an amazing instinct on. Like they've talked to 3 customers. They think this thing will be the solve. They never could have put it at number 1 before because it was not that defensible, but in their heart, they thought it was right. Now, because they have to ship something every 2 weeks, that thing's easy to do. They ship it and it works, and they have the data to show it. And so it flips everything on its head. And so I feel like it's changed my entire perspective, honestly, on like what it takes to like build a product company and how quickly we can go, and how much culture matters.
Right. That's fascinating. I think there's some more literature now coming out to support that like self-organization perspective, I think, where the organization is slightly more horizontal in terms of the empowerment that you give to each individual person that's part of a team. So it's less like pyramid structured. I don't know if that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it was more, we still have like a hierarchy that's normal.
Yeah.
It was more like the cultural aspect of saying speed. We have a cultural document that basically says we used to praise like an organized, kind of bulletproof roadmap. Now we don't praise that anymore. We praise speed now over internal comms. We praise, learning fast over having the right plan. We praise a roadmap that changes over one that stays the same.
Yeah.
We're really explicit on those cultural differences, and that ended up having an enormous impact. And actually, it had an impact in like days. That was what was so crazy about it.
Wow.
We went to all the PMs and we're like, hey, this is what we want. And I remember them saying like, I was like slightly nervous because they were not shipping that quickly. And it was like, do they not want to ship quickly? And they were like, no, we want to ship quick. Of course, that's what we want to do.
Yeah.
Like of course I want to ship fast.
Right.
And we're like, oh, wow, we really have created this issue, haven't we? So
Right. Like, like holding people back with like the reins a little bit. Wow. Fascinating. This has been such a pleasure, Chris. Thank you so much for showing up and sharing so many of your insights. It's fascinating to hear your perspective. Is there anything else you wanted to share with our audience? How can people get in touch with you if they wanted to follow your work?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This was fun. And you can find me at Chris Savage on LinkedIn, and I'm also on Twitter. And my podcast is Talking Too Loud, and obviously Wistia is WSTIA.com. So check us out.
Awesome. Great. Thanks everyone for tuning in.